The world was not as it had always been. The land, once filled with towering forests and sunlit plains, had become a place of trembling fear, chaos, and endless danger. Smoke hung heavy in the air, carrying the acrid stench of fire and ash, while distant rumbles shook the ground beneath the feet of those who still walked its surface. In this fractured world, life had been forced to change, to adapt, to survive in ways that were unthinkable just months before. The sky was grey with dust, turning sunlight into a dim, trembling glow, and the rivers, swollen and restless, whispered promises of both safety and uncertainty. Luma, a young Hadrosaur, barely reaching the strength of adulthood, stood at the edge of the nearest forest, her wide eyes scanning the horizon. Behind her, her siblings shuffled nervously, their small bodies trembling in the wind that carried the scent of smoke and the faint, terrifying aroma of predators. Luma's heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from responsibility. She was their guide now, their protector, and in a world that had turned against them, every step could mean life or death. The first warning came as a tremor through the earth. Subtle yet insistent, Luma froze, listening to the rustle of leaves, the cracking of distant trees, the low warning growls of creatures she did not fully understand but instinctively feared. She nudged her siblings gently, her movements deliberate, coaxing them to stay low, to move silently. The ground beneath them was littered with debris, fallen branches, scorched soil, and the remnants of creatures less fortunate than they had been. Every sense was alive, alert, a constant measure of risk and opportunity, and Luma had learned quickly that hesitation could be fatal. The forest behind them was no sanctuary. Trees toppled without warning, fires leaped from branch to branch, and predators prowled silently, waiting for the slightest sign of weakness. Luma led her siblings through a narrow passage, keeping them close, teaching them how to move with caution, how to watch the shadows, and how to listen to the subtle language of danger. Even the air seemed to carry threats. Ash fell in fine showers, landing on their backs and nostrils, making each breath a small trial. Luma stopped, turned her head, and let out a low cola signal, learned over weeks of survival, warning her siblings to remain still. A pair of raptors skittered past a ridge, their eyes glinting, sharp claws raking the earth, and for a heartbeat, Luma imagined the end. But they passed, uninterested in the cautious herd, and relief rippled through her small group. Hours passed like this, each moment a delicate dance between hunger, fear, and instinct. The ground beneath them began to slope downward toward the nearest waterway, a swollen river running faster than any Luma had ever seen. She felt a strange, almost magnetic pull toward it. Water had always been a place of sustenance, a place where fish could be caught, where vegetation grew in abundance. But today, the river was different. Today, it promised safety in ways the land no longer could. The thought of stepping into it made Luma cautious. Currents could be unpredictable, predators could lurk in unseen depths, and yet, the land behind her was filled with fire, falling trees, and the constant threat of death. With careful nudges, she guided her siblings toward the water's edge. Each step was measured, every movement deliberate. The youngest shivered with both cold and fear, leaning into Luma for comfort, and she pressed her side against theirs, a reminder that they were not alone. The river stretched wide before them, its surface reflecting the ashen sky in rippling waves. Luma stepped into the shallows first, testing the current, feeling the cold bite at her legs, and then, with a silent signal, she encouraged her siblings to follow. One by one, they waded into the river, their movements clumsy at first, but gradually more confident, the water embracing them like a shield against the dangers of the land. From the riverbank, the land behind them seemed to groan and shudder. Trees fell with crashing inevitability, smoke rose in angry plumes, and the cries of terrified creatures echoed across the plains. Luma glanced back, heart aching for the others who had not been able to escape, for the creatures swallowed by fire and predator alike. But she had no time for grief, only for action. The river was a sanctuary now, the only place where her siblings could breathe without constant fear. She let them drink from the cool water, taste the tender shoots along the banks, and even chase small fish that darted just beneath the surface. For the first time that day, their small group could move without immediate peril, and Luma felt a flicker of hope. Yet safety in this world was never permanent. The river itself was alive, shifting with the power of unseen forces. Fallen trees floated downstream, debris from distant lands threatened to sweep them off balance, and waterborne predators, long silent creatures that lurked beneath the surface, tested their vigilance. Luma remained at the forefront, eyes scanning, muscles tense, every sense sharpened to its maximum. She nudged her siblings to stick close, used her weight to shield them, and guided them to shallow pools where movement was easier and danger less immediate. Each small triumph, finding a safe nook, catching a small fish, avoiding a hidden predator, was celebrated in the quiet gestures and soft calls shared between them. Night fell slowly, draping the river and surrounding landscape in a silver-gray haze. Stars reflected in the water, tiny points of light that seemed impossibly distant yet comforting in their constancy. Luma led her siblings to a sheltered bend, where vegetation offered cover and the current was gentle. They huddled together, bodies pressed close, hearts still racing but slowly calming. For the first time, they could rest without immediate fear of fire, predator, or collapsing terrain. Luma's head dipped slightly, eyes reflecting the faint light of the stars, and in that quiet moment, she allowed herself a thought she had never dared to entertain during the day. Perhaps survival was not only about instinct, but about finding sanctuary, about learning to adapt when the world turned against you. As the night deepened, the river murmured softly, a lullaby of water against banks, of hidden life beneath the surface, of the delicate balance between danger and safety. Luma pressed closer to her siblings, feeling their breaths even and slow, trusting in the sanctuary they had found together. Somewhere upstream, fish darted, leaves rustled, and the world beyond remained chaotic and unforgiving. But here, in this moment, among the water that had become their shield, life persisted. Luma closed her eyes, allowing the rhythm of the river to seep into her consciousness, carrying both vigilance and hope. In a world that had turned land into a realm of death, water had become their refuge, fragile yet powerful, and through it, they could endure. The morning light shimmered across the river, reflecting a world still scarred but momentarily calm. Luma nudged her siblings gently, guiding them through shallow pools and along the muddy banks where tender shoots and young plants grew in abundance. The water, which had seemed strange and uncertain at first, now felt like a shield, a living barrier between them and the relentless dangers of the land. Luma moved carefully, her gaze sweeping every ripple and shadow. Even here, safety was fragile. Predators could strike from beneath the surface, currents could sweep the unwary away, and the water could betray them in ways that land never had. Yet survival demanded learning, and Luma watched as her siblings began to wade more confidently. They pawed at small fish that darted beneath the surface, tugged at floating leaves, and discovered the nourishment the water offered. Their laughter, soft, happy chirps, was a balm to her anxious heart. In these small moments, she felt the truth of her new reality. Water, once merely a place to drink or hide, had become a source of life, of hope, and of skill. She encouraged them to push further into the shallow lagoons, teaching them to feel the currents with their legs, to test the depth before moving, and to trust in their instincts. Days passed, and the river became a classroom. Luma demonstrated how to catch fish by cornering them in eddies, how to break off soft shoots without harming the plant's root, and how to sense the approach of danger through vibrations and subtle changes in the water. Her siblings learned quickly, imitating her movements with growing skill, their confidence swelling. Luma allowed herself a brief smile each time a small triumph occurred, a successful catch, a moment of playful balance, a tiny fish slipping into a younger sibling's grasp. These were victories of life, small yet monumental in the shadow of so much death and uncertainty. Even as the river offered refuge, danger never fully left. Crocodile-like predators lurked in the murky depths, their eyes glinting just beneath the surface, waiting for missteps. Luma learned to watch for them, noticing the subtle waves and distortions that betrayed their presence. Once a sudden swirl of water sent a chill down her spine. A predator had been closer than she realized. She nudged her siblings toward the shallow bank, pressing herself between them and the threat. The predator watched for a moment before slipping back beneath the surface, and the siblings clung to one another, trembling, yet alive. Luma's heart pounded, but she knew that each close encounter strengthened them, teaching vigilance and resilience. The nights were quieter, though never entirely free from tension. The river whispered in a constant, gentle murmur, hiding unseen currents and lurking shapes beneath its mirrored surface. Luma pressed her siblings together, letting them huddle near her side while she remained alert, ears and eyes scanning the faint shadows of the surrounding trees and water edges. Even in sleep, she thought, lessons could be learned, senses sharpened, instincts remembered, and in these calm yet watchful nights, a bond deepened among them, one of trust, reliance, and the quiet pride of survival. Weeks passed, and the water revealed secrets that Luma had never anticipated. Small floating islands of vegetation offered both food and refuge. Edible roots clung to submerged banks. Tiny fish and aquatic insects provided sustenance in surprising abundance. The river, once simply a barrier, had become a network of life, a labyrinth of opportunities and subtle lessons. Luma explored farther each day, sometimes alone, sometimes with her siblings, mapping the currents, observing predators from a safe distance, and discovering shallow alcoves where the water was calm enough to rest. With each discovery, her confidence grew, and she began to feel a quiet triumph. The river, dangerous yet forgiving, was theirs to navigate, theirs to survive within. But even the river was not perfect. Storms swept down from distant mountains, turning calm waters into churning chaos. Large debris swept along by floodwaters threatened to crush the unwary. Luma learned to read the sky, to sense changes in the wind, to recognize the patterns that preceded disaster. During one particularly violent storm, she pressed her siblings against a partially submerged bank, holding them steady as waves surged around them. Their eyes were wide with fear, but they trusted her completely. When the storm passed, she guided them to safety, both proud and exhausted, understanding that each day survived was a testament to their growing skill and cohesion as a small, resilient family. By the time the stars emerged, scattered across the dark sky like glowing jewels, Luma and her siblings rested in a quiet cove. Their bodies were wet, weary, but alive. She watched them sleep, feeling the warmth of their closeness and the satisfaction of each challenge overcome. The river, so unpredictable and alive, had taught them more than safety. It had taught them strength, adaptability, and the quiet confidence that even the deadliest land could not touch them here. In the gentle murmur of water against banks, in the faint rustle of reeds, Luma allowed herself to believe that survival was no longer simply about running or hiding. It was about understanding, adapting, and mastering the world around them, however strange and terrifying it might be. Time passed in the river Refuge, and the days began to blend together into a rhythm of cautious exploration, food gathering, and constant vigilance. Luma had become adept at reading the water, sensing the presence of predators before they struck, and guiding her siblings to safety in moments that might have otherwise ended in disaster. Yet the river was not infinite, and resources began to show signs of strain. Edible roots were fewer, fish swam away into deeper waters, and small water insects became scarce. Hunger reminded them of the fragility of life, even here, in the haven that had once seemed so perfect. Luma knew they had to move farther, explore new areas, and seek larger, safer spaces. She nudged her siblings onward, guiding them along winding channels and flooded forests, each step measured and deliberate. The younger ones were cautious, clinging to her side, but trust had deepened through weeks of survival. They learned to navigate currents, to avoid whirlpools, and to recognize subtle signs of predators, both in water and along distant shores. Each success reinforced their bond, each misstep offered a lesson, and each challenge hardened their spirits against the chaos that had overtaken the land. Predators tested them constantly. Crocodile-like creatures lurked beneath submerged branches, snapping at any movement that seemed careless. Packs of raptors prowled along the banks, their eyes sharp, talons ready, and wings spreading with sudden speed to cut off escape. Luma led her siblings through narrow channels, under partially submerged logs, and across shallow pools, each maneuver a delicate dance with death. Once a raptor swooped down, narrowly missing the youngest sibling, sending a jolt of panic through the group. Luma reacted instantly, pressing them into the water and holding her body between predator and family. The raptor retreated, and the siblings trembled, but survived. Luma allowed herself a brief, quiet sigh of relief, knowing that survival was earned through intelligence, vigilance, and courage. Even in these high-stakes moments, small victories brought warmth and joy. They discovered new food sources along the flooded banks, learned to stir up fish hiding beneath debris, and found edible plants clinging to logs and islands. Luma watched her siblings grow stronger, their movements more confident, their eyes bright with understanding. She pressed the lessons deeper into them: how to sense danger, how to take measured risks, how to navigate both river and hazard with care. In these moments, the harshness of the world outside faded, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of mastering the refuge they had carved out in the water. Night brought its own challenges. Currents shifted unpredictably, hidden predators glided silently beneath the surface, and the distant sounds of land-based chaos fires, falling trees, and the cries of dying creatures reminded Luma that sanctuary was always provisional. She kept watch over her siblings, nudging them into protective positions, pressing herself against them for warmth and reassurance, and allowing them to sleep with only the gentle guidance of her presence. Each day survived was a triumph. Each night endured, a testament to their resilience. Over time, Luma learned to use the environment itself to their advantage. Floating debris became platforms, natural sandbanks became resting zones, and shallow pools offered protection against larger water predators. Each innovation, each adaptation, strengthened the group and bolstered their confidence. The bond between Luma and her siblings deepened, a quiet, unspoken understanding that life, no matter how perilous, could be mastered through intelligence, care, and cooperation. Yet loss was never far away. Some smaller creatures succumbed to unseen threats, swept away by currents or seized by predators. Luma mourned silently, pressing her siblings close, acknowledging the fragility of their existence even within this water sanctuary. These moments, though painful, became lessons, reminders of vigilance, respect, and the necessity of adaptation. By facing and surviving such trials, they grew stronger, more attuned to their environment, and more capable of navigating the challenges that lay ahead. The days slowly stretched into weeks, and the siblings began to move with fluid confidence. The river had become a living classroom, a crucible of survival, and a place of quiet triumphs and small joys. Each fish caught, each plant gathered, each predator evaded, strengthened their spirits and sharpened their instincts. Luma, though ever vigilant, allowed herself to feel a measure of pride. Her guidance had preserved their lives, her knowledge had protected them, and her courage had given them hope in a world turned upside down. Eventually, Luma and her siblings reached the widest stretch of the flooded river, a calm lagoon protected by thick reeds and shallow islands. Here the water was gentle, the currents slow, and the predators few. The lagoon became their permanent sanctuary, a place where life could be rebuilt, where food was plentiful, and where safety was no longer measured by constant panic. Luma watched her siblings explore with curiosity and growing confidence, their movements precise, their senses sharp, their hearts lighter for the first time in months. She guided them in foraging techniques that would sustain them for months, showing how to gather edible plants from the banks, catch fish in shallow pools, and recognize subtle signs of danger from beneath the water's surface. The lagoon itself became a network of opportunities, small islands for rest, submerged logs as platforms, and quiet coves for shelter during storms. Luma's patience and intelligence had transformed the once threatening water into a home, a haven, and a school of survival. Days passed peacefully, punctuated only by minor challenges: a sudden whirlpool, a wandering predator, or shifting water levels. Each time Luma led her siblings with calm authority, teaching them to adapt, to rely on each other, and to trust in the lessons of experience. They laughed quietly when fish slipped from their grasp, celebrated small victories in gathering food, and learned the rhythms of their new home. Through these experiences, they gained not only sustenance but confidence, and the realization that survival could be a quiet, deliberate, and achievable endeavor rather than an endless flight from death. At night, under the glow of stars reflected in the water, Luma allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought of the land they had left behind, scarred and deadly, of the predators and disasters that had claimed so many lives. She pressed close to her siblings, feeling their warmth and the quiet, steady rhythm of their breathing, and allowed a sense of hope to take root. They had survived because of intelligence, vigilance, cooperation, and the courage to seek refuge where none had been expected. Water, which had seemed dangerous and foreign, had become a cradle of life. In the months that followed, Luma continued to guide and teach her siblings, passing knowledge of safe zones, food sources, and predator behavior. Each day their confidence grew, their skills sharpened, and their bond strengthened. Luma's leadership ensured not only their survival but their thriving. The lagoon became a place of quiet peace, punctuated by the gentle sounds of water, the soft rustle of reeds, and the occasional fish breaking the surface. Here, they could live without constant fear, grow stronger, and preserve the lessons that would guide future generations. Though danger still existed beyond the sanctuary, Luma understood the greatest lesson of all: adaptability, intelligence, and care could turn even the most perilous world into a refuge. As she gazed across the still waters, watching her siblings explore and play, she felt the quiet triumph of survival, the miracle of hope, and the enduring strength of life in the face of unimaginable challenges. Water, once merely a part of the landscape, had become their world, their protector, and the place where life, against all odds, endured.